back to Great Northwest Weaponry. This is Thomas, and today taking a look at something pretty cool. This is my 1944 Inland M1 Carbine. We'd done the first shot shorts on this a little while back and figured it was time to do the demo. This is 15 rounds of 30 caliber carbine. We do have 5 more shots left. We started with just 10 there, so go ahead and turn off our safety. Take this last 5. Caught one right there. That was weird. Now, again, this is a piece that I've been really hoping to get my hands on. Getting some real World War II Americana has been a goal for a while. I've only had the model 1903 A3 up until this point, but finally got one of our World War II semi-autos, and if all goes well, we'll have the other, arguably more famous one in the not too distant future. But let's go ahead, hop over to the gun room and talk some carbine history. How the M1 carbine came to be is surprisingly convoluted, actually. There's a lot of moving parts here, but it all kicked off because the US Army Ordnance Department was receiving reports prior to World War II that the M1 Garand standard infantry rifle was a bit big and bulky for support troops. So most of this would be like staff, artillerymen, radio men, and they decided that this could be remedied with a carbine type weapon. They wanted something that was, about half the weight or less, if possible, than the M1 Garand, but more accurate than the standard issue pistol, the 1911. This would have been the 1911 A1 at this point in time. In 1938, word was sent out that the Army was looking to adopt some sort of a carbine rifle for, again, mostly for these kind of rear echelon troops and or support troops. Official requirements weren't set until 1940, but in 1938 is when this all really kind of started kicking off. Now, this is where we're going to take a deviation that gets kind of into the weeds a bit. So Winchester, in 1938, was in the middle of working on a number of projects with Jonathan Ed Browning. This is the brother of the very famous John Moses Browning. Who names both of their kids John, by the way? That seems just like you're asking for confusion to the household. John, yes, no, Moses, not Ed. But anyway, weird tangent aside, Winchester develops the .30 carbine cartridge, but does not submit their own carbine for this initial run of trials. Again, they were working on a number of different projects with Ed Browning, one of these being the G30 rifle, which they were intending on putting into trials to potentially replace or run in tandem with the M1 Garand. Chambered in .30-06, it was meant to be a semi-automatic design, but then Ed Browning passed away in 1939, and all the projects that he had going with Winchester were shelved. Now enter David Marshall Williams, who at that time had created a short stroke gas piston system for rifles that he actually began work on this while he was incarcerated in North Carolina at a minimum security work farm. He came highly recommended, and so Winchester hired the guy to complete the Ed Browning designs that were currently in the works. One of them that he completed was the G30, which was updated to the G30M, and then eventually to the Winchester M2 rifle. Meant to be the Winchester M2 military rifle, but they had to submit it for trials. Now, meanwhile, back with the Ordnance Department, the first round of trials carbines sent in by numerous companies and private contractors were not impressed with any of them. But after these trials concluded, Winchester submitted their M2 military rifle to the Ordnance Department for consideration, and it was quickly determined that this design could be made more compact. The design implements from who would become known as Carbine Williams had already reduced the weight of the G30 significantly, and they believed that it could be made even more compact and potentially cut down to as little as 4.5 to 4.75 pounds, of which was within their requirements for what they wanted for a carbine. So they sent it back to Winchester, told them, we want this smaller. And in 13 days, Winchester had cobbled together a team of people and created and presented a new prototype. And the Army Ordnance Department was quite impressed with this. Testing was done in August 1941. Winchester, all the while, was working on a more refined version, which Williams had been in and out of the project. The main thing that it incorporated was his bolt design. But otherwise, again, it's kind of a Frankenstein. When I say it's a patchwork gun, it really was. They had like 5 or 6 different people on this that were bringing multiple different ideas to the table, and pretty much everything got implemented. And Williams came back in for the refining of what was kind of dubbed as his gun. This is why we call this person Carbine Williams. And what was next presented is what would win the next round of trials in September of 1941. And the M1 Carbine was officially designated for military service. Production now kicked off going into 1942, specifically from July of 1942 to August of 1945. This is when your complete run of the military M1 carbines were created, at least the World War II ones. And over 6.1 million of them would be made by numerous companies, Winchester included. The one that we see in front of us here is actually made by a subsidiary of GM, General Motors, Inland, and they made not only the version that you see in front of me here, but they also are the ones most directly responsible for the creation of the paratrooper carbine. You've seen the ones with the folding stock and the really kind of chintzy pistol grip coming off the bottom. And these were initially intended to go to paratroopers as well as these other support groups, or support troops rather. Now, the earliest versions had a different kind of rear sight than what you see on this example, but this actually is correct for the year of this gun. This is in 1944, and in 1944 they changed to this peep sight on a ramp. The earlier version was a simple 2-position peep sight that I think it was 100 yards for the one and then 300 for the other. The new one, adopted in 1945, is adjustable. Also, so 1944 is when the adjustable sight was added. Also, bayonet lug was added in 1945. Now you see there is a bayonet lug on mine. And I would say there shouldn't be, but it also makes 100% sense that there is. Because basically as soon as World War II ended, they went through a full refurbishment program with these, and bayonet lugs were added to all of them that went through that refurbishment program. As such, finding a World War II example without the bayonet lug is actually pretty difficult. Initially, when these were issued without the bayonet lug, they'd be issued in tandem with a knife that looks an awful lot like this bayonet, the M3 fighting knife. Now, this is the M4 bayonet, and this is a genuine M4. There would be various other iterations of them that came later, but this is the very end of World War II going into Korea model of the knife. Also has a sheath as well, but the sheath is marked M8, and I did not do enough research on the sheath to know if there was a marked difference between one and the next, but they pretty much just kept updating this same bayonet design over and over and over and over again going forward in time. These were initially made with 15-round box magazines, and again, there's a ton of companies that made these. We'll take a look at how to identify mags when we go to the tabletop. There also were 30-round mags that came later, and these continue to be produced in the civilian market to this day, but the primary military run of them is going to be your the ones that everybody is seeking after are the ones that were made during the World War II era. Those are generally the most expensive ones. These served in US military forces all the way up until Vietnam. Particularly in the early days, military advisors sent to Vietnam often were issued M1 carbines that would have gone through the full refurbishment process. There's a couple of other things to look out for. So the earlier ones had this handguard with the 2 holes in the top. Later ones had 4. There's a lot of little details that collectors look out for. And again, it's a very complicated, layered process that came to this being, and there were a lot of names attached to it. The most notable being, you know, Ed Browning's original design is what was then modified by Carbine Williams into, you know, what you see before us, kind of, even though he just basically implemented his bolt, and then a whole team was assembled to make the gun that had his bolt into a carbine, and then he was brought back in to refine it into the M1 carbine that we know today. The paratrooper variation is also, just as a side note, called the M1A1. And there are other variations. The M2 and the M3 carbine are both select fire, so fully automatic capable, whereas the M1 carbine is not, and as such, people like yours truly can easily get your hands on them. Another thing that collectors always are keeping their eyes out for is this bolt. The top of it is milled flat on examples made during World War II. If it is not, then it is a replacement. Now, we're going to transition over to the tabletop. We've got markings to look at on both the gun itself, the magazines, the bayonet, and as well as disassembly. And this is one, when I learned how it comes apart, there will not be a field strip short on this, because there is no such thing as field stripping this gun. If you take it apart, you take it apart entirely. There's, it's a more involved process than, say, the SVT-40 does have a degree of it that can be field stripped. This, not really. Like, if you were going to clean it, you would basically just put some oil in the rails and call it good. To actually take it apart, again, is a whole thing, but we're going to do it. So let's go ahead and transition to the tabletop. Let's start this out with looking at some markings here. So remove our magazine, and you can see on this one, we've got a U stamped right there. This is Union Hardware. I do have a second magazine. See, this one is an IW in a circle. That one is a Winchester magazine. So these magazine markings, there's like a couple dozen different markings that can show up on these. It is pretty easy to find a list of what is what. I just happen to have Winchester and Union. Now, for the bayonet, I mentioned this is a M8 marked scabbard, but you can see right in here, trying to get this position so there's not terrible shadows here, US M4 Utica. So Utica made M4. You do want, if you're trying to get an original one, you want one with the leather washers, not the plastic ones that I've seen. It's a interesting attachment apparatus. I've not seen another bayonet quite like this, but it is, for all intents and purposes, a fighting knife that was modified into a bayonet, as we discussed earlier. Now, let's look at some disassembly features here. For this, we will need a screwdriver, just fat flathead, and this is going to be to remove that screw right there, and that is the only thing that we're going to need to do for what we're doing here. I'm just basically going to take the whole barrel and operating assembly out and get as far as you would for cleaning. There are lots of videos online that go into a deeper in process here. Also, before we do that, I've mentioned a few times that this one is an inland, and you can almost not see it because it's kind of under this rear sight, but it is marked right above the serial number. Other notable markings on the gun is your, designation for the gun itself, US Carbine caliber 30 M1. That is the official designation for the gun. And then up here on the barrel is where our date and also Inland MFG General Motors 244. So February 1944. Now with this one, I do have this weird little plug here. This is not the original oiler. I would like to get an original oiler and swap it out for that plug. This is the correct sling though. And before we go any farther with the disassembly, we're gonna need to take off this, this top bit of the sling.
I'm not going to bother with the oiler because it's kind of a pain and it's not a real oiler, so there's nothing really to show. Now, we just need to unscrew this, and it is a long screw, so I'm going to skip over some of this. Once it's fully loose, you can pull this forward with your thumb. You need to make sure that that isn't hooked onto there. And once that is forward, you can take our top handguard, just kind of push it forward a bit because it locks onto that lip there. Just push it forward, set that aside. And now this whole mechanism kind of levers up and out. And you can see that hook right there actually goes under this metal piece in the back here. And that is all you really need to do for cleaning purposes. I'm not going to take it down any further than that. Again, it's pretty easy to find videos that do, but with it like this, you can get in and clean all the bits that you need to. I just lost my screw. I'm going to go fetch that. Ha! Little bugger tried to get away from me. It's a goofy looking screw too, now that I'm taking a close look at it. But anyway, putting it back together, straightforward. Just lower the whole thing in and make sure it's under that back piece before you lower it down. Once it's lowered down, you can go ahead and set our top hand guard back on, slide this back down until it clicks in. Now for this, I'm gonna have to kind of hold tension and just screw it down. And again, I will be skipping over a good chunk of this because it is a long screw, and I don't think you want to sit here watching me just spinning a screwdriver for an extended period of time. All right, don't need to be just as tight as humanly possible. It just needs to be tight enough that everything stays and that it's not going to slip past that hook there. Go ahead and restring our sling through this front loop. And that is that. Let's go ahead and take this back out to the range and put another magazine through it. Gonna go ahead and attach our bayonet for this segment here. And removing the bayonet is actually really strange, as you have to push in both of these wings in order to get it free. But putting it on, simply slide it into place. Now, loading and unloading, also pretty straightforward. There's a button right there at my finger. Push that in, remove your magazine. And I do have 2 mags for this, as we'd looked at already. Oh, it's falling down into my pocket deeper though. All right, there we go. And as we'd already mentioned, this is 15 rounds of 30 caliber carbine. And let's go ahead and test our safety here. It's this little switch right here. So pushing forward, that is safe. Let's see if it functions. Seems to. It completely stops the trigger from moving, and you can reach forward with your pointer finger and disengage that, but you do want to be careful not to yank the trigger while disengaging, as it seems it would be very easy to do so. Once it's flat, that puts your finger right in line to pull the trigger. Now let's go ahead and fire off 15 shots here. Now, that is a strange feature of the M1 Carbine. It does not lock open on empty. I don't know why that would be part of the design choices for this, but it is what they did. Now, again, removing the mag is just a simple push in the button, pull the mag free, and putting the mag back in, you just push it straight in. But yeah, it's a cool piece. It's a piece I'm really glad to finally have my hands on an example of, and getting the bayonet with it was just a nice little additional feature. We'll definitely be seeing this in future videos. I've got a number of plans for some, maybe bringing out a pile of my semi-auto rifles, maybe doing just the semi-auto rifles of World War II, as I have a few that are post-World War as well. So probably do 2 separate batches there for Day at the Range videos, possibly bring this out for some versus videos at some point. It's just a cool piece. It's, you know, they're iconic. It's something that is immediately recognizable. And again, very glad to have one in my collection at long last. So hope you all enjoyed the video. It's been Thomas with Great Northwest Weaponry, and I'll see you next time.